She broke your heart, and your first instinct was to scream, to send that message, to explain what she lost, what you gave, how much it hurt, because pain demands to be heard. That's what they tell you, right? That real men express themselves, that staying silent is weakness, that healing requires release. But what if they're wrong? What if silence isn't avoidance, but evolution, because every time you cried out before, she fed on it. Your pain became her proof. Your reaction became her reassurance. But not this time. This time, you say nothing. You vanish from the conversation, and in that void, she finally meets the truth. Not your words, but your absence. If you've ever chosen silence over chaos, if you've ever walked away with dignity instead of begging, write something in the comments. Let the world know silence isn't weakness, it's power. And now, let's go deeper, because what happens next isn't about her anymore. It's about you and the man you're about to become. 1. The illusion. They expected you to break, to call, to chase, to explain, to give them one last performance before fading into memory. But this time, you didn't. You chose something most men are afraid of. You chose silence. Not because you weren't hurting. You were. But you knew that pain is not always meant to be shared, especially not with the one who caused it. Silence, when it comes from a man who used to give everything, is not absence. It's a message, a loud, deliberate, undeniable message. You no longer have access to me. When a woman betrays or leaves a man who truly loved her, she expects an echo, a storm, tears, texts, pleas, because that chaos proves she still matters. It feeds her ego. It confirms that even in leaving you, she still owns a part of you. But what happens when none of that comes? What happens when you walk away without a word? Her narrative crumbles. She starts questioning if she ever mattered at all. The very thing that made her act with cold detachment, her ego now feels the pressure. The silence doesn't flatter her. It doesn't beg or apologize. It doesn't play the game. And that's the first fracture, not in your heart, but in her illusion of power. Don't let anyone confuse silence with weakness. It is the most intentional form of resistance. It's not passive. It's not cowardly. Silence says, you don't get to hear my pain. Not because it isn't there, but because you are no longer the one I share it with. You bleed, but you bleed in private. You don't give her the satisfaction of witnessing your wound. You don't hand her the weapon and then ask for healing. You let time close it without her. When your voice disappears, her thoughts grow louder. She hears herself now, no longer silenced by your need for closure. And in that reflection, she doesn't see the strong, desirable woman she believed she was. She sees a person who lost something rare, a man who would have given everything, but now gives her nothing. And that silence becomes a mirror sharper than any argument. She expected you to break down, to spiral, to crawl back, but you didn't. You gave her nothing, no drama, no emotional meltdown. And that nothing, it terrifies the kind of ego that survives on attention. She can't twist silence. She can't control it. She can only sit with it. And that's what breaks her. Slowly. This isn't revenge. You're not trying to win. You're simply drawing the line. You're not avoiding conflict. You're declaring sovereignty. My emotions belong to me now. My words are not yours to twist. My presence is earned, not demanded. And in doing so, you flip the script. You reclaim the very thing she underestimated, your self-respect. The man who stays silent is not broken. He is focused. He doesn't scream. He doesn't beg. He simply understands. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't chase. It doesn't plead. It withdraws, with clarity, with purpose, with unshakable calm. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to starve the thing that wounded you of your energy. 2. The mirror. Sometimes the most powerful way to show someone what they've lost is to give them nothing. No explanation, no argument, just absence. Let her sit with the silence she created. Let her feel what it's like when you stop filling the space, when the noise dies down, when there are no more messages, no more reactions, no more pieces of you trying to hold it together. That's when she starts to crumble. Not because you yelled, not because you punished her, but because you didn't. You walked away with calm. And that silence, it begins to echo louder than any word ever could. You see, something shifts when a man finally realizes he no longer needs to be understood. He no longer needs to explain. He no longer needs to chase closure from the person who caused the wound. He just lets the silence do the work. Because the woman with the inflated ego, the one who believed she was irreplaceable, always the prize, she depends on one belief, that you'll come back. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually. That assumption is what fuels her illusion of control. She tells herself that your silence is just a phase, that you're hurting, but you'll break, that you'll send that message, that you'll cave, just like last time. And as long as she believes that, she doesn't self-reflect, she doesn't question, she waits. But silence is a slow poison to the ego. It starts as a whisper. Why hasn't he said anything? Then it grows. Maybe he's waiting for the right moment. And eventually, it turns into something she's not ready to handle. Maybe he's really gone. That realization, it shifts something deep inside her, because what she thought was control now feels like loss. And not just any loss, but the kind that can't be undone. That's the power of time. It dissolves fantasy. It wipes away stories she told herself to stay proud, and it replaces illusion with truth. And the longer you remain silent, the more your absence becomes undeniable, not staged, not dramatic, but real. And that's what her ego cannot tolerate. You see, she could survive your anger, your pain, even your outrage, because those still meant you were engaged, reacting, connected. She could twist your words. She could rationalize your outbursts. She could make your emotions part of her story. But silence, she can't argue with it. She can't spin it. She can't manipulate it. It gives her nothing to cling to. That's when she starts to squirm. She posts things online, just vague enough to catch your eye. She talks to your friends. She throws subtle tests your way, but you don't bite. You don't respond. You stay gone. And that ego, the one that once stood tall, starts to collapse from the inside, because she waited for something that never came. And in that emptiness, she is forced to confront herself. No distractions, no audience, just the echo of her own choices. And that echo, it gets louder with time, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. It grows, and that's when the memories return. Not because you brought them back, but because she can't stop them anymore. The way you listened, the way you protected her emotionally, how you made her feel safe, present, seen. And it hits her, not as guilt, but as awareness. She remembers what she had, what she lost, and what she can't recreate with anyone else, because you're not there. And in your absence, there is space. Space for reflection, space for regret. Silence, when paired with time, is not passive, It's a force, acute, relentless erosion of everything false she built up to feel powerful. And when that illusion begins to crack, she sees the truth. That power she thought she had, it was never hers. It only existed because you kept giving her attention. Now that it's gone, she's no longer in control. You are. 3. The memory. You didn't take control by overpowering her. You didn't yell. You didn't threaten. You didn't make a scene. You took control by letting go. And that is what unsettles her the most. Because the one thing ego can't understand is this: that silence can be stronger than confrontation, that walking away can echo louder than slamming a door. She expected a fight. You gave her peace. And peace, when she anticipated chaos, becomes a storm of its own. But let's be clear, this isn't about getting even. This isn't revenge, dressed in silence. This isn't a punishment wrapped in patience. This is about something far greater. It's about dignity. You're not staying silent to play games. You're staying silent because, for the first time, you see the truth. You see that your value isn't dependent on whether or not she recognizes it. You don't need her approval to feel worthy. You no longer ask to be seen because you were already there, fully, present, loyal, and she couldn't see it. So now, you say nothing, and in that nothing, she begins to hear everything. The longer she goes without your presence, the steady, grounded, masculine energy that once centered her, the more the illusion begins to crack. Not just because she lost a man, but because she lost a man who loved her enough to walk away with honor, a man who didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't collapse, a man who had the strength to let go without making a spectacle of it. And it's that silence, that terrifying stillness, that begins to shake the core of her identity, because she built her ego on the idea that she was in control, that no matter what she did, you'd come back, that she could push, withdraw, ignore, and still find you waiting. But now you're not there. Not because you disappeared, but because you chose yourself. And when your voice disappears, something else shows up in its place. Truth. In the stillness where your words once lived, she begins to hear everything she tried to avoid, every red flag she ignored, every gift she took for granted. She begins to hear what she lost, and by the time she understands the weight of that silence, it's already too late. You're gone, not in anger, but in clarity. And now, you need to understand something. She's only starting to learn. People don't remember logic. They don't sit and replay facts. They don't count arguments or rational points. They remember how they felt. They remember presence. They remember warmth. And they remember loss. She won't sit alone thinking about how justified she was when she left. She won't review the reasons she convinced herself you weren't right. She'll sit in the quiet and feel. She'll feel the difference between the world when you were in it and the silence that remains. And that silence, crafted by your absence, will begin to speak. It will speak in the spaces where you once held her together. It will whisper during her moments of stillness. It will hum like an ache in the background of her new conversations. Not because you said anything powerful, but because you didn't. You said nothing, and yet you said everything. Absence has a strange way of surfacing the truth. Not all at once, not loudly, but slowly, like mist rising from still waters. When someone who once dismissed your love begins to feel your absence, they don't sit and revisit their excuses. They don't rehearse the logic that led them to walk away. No, they sit with the quiet. And in that quiet, emotion begins to surface. Not reason, not strategy, just feeling. And those feelings whisper things she never expected to hear. Things like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I let go of something real, but those whispers don't arrive as thunder. They creep in like shadows, soft, slow, invasive. They make her uncomfortable. Even as she smiles, they follow her. Even as she pretends to move on, she'll keep posting. She'll keep laughing. She might even go on dates. But beneath the performance, something heavy lingers. It starts small, just a flicker of discomfort she can't quite explain, a strange ache she won't admit. But shadows grow in the absence of light, and the light she once had was you. It was in the way you showed up, in the consistency of your care, in the look you gave her that said, "You matter, you are seen." She didn't understand it then. She mistook your calm for complacency, your patience for passivity, your silence for weakness. But now that light is gone, and the space that once felt safe is now cold, she's surrounded by people, but none of them make her feel what you did. Because you weren't trying to impress her. You weren't playing a part. You were simply real. And the more she tries to distract herself, the more your absence takes shape, not as something temporary, but as something absolute. She tries to silence it, but it only grows louder, because the human mind can't ignore a void. We fill it, we imagine, we wonder. She begins to replay the conversations, revisit the memories, question what she once felt so sure about. And while she spirals, you're still living, healing, focused on yourself. She expected you to chase, to crack, to say something, anything, but you didn't. And that silence, it isn't quiet. It's deafening. It whispers at night. It echoes in still moments. It shakes loose the truth she tried to bury. Because when a woman with ego loses emotional control, it doesn't just bruise her pride. It shakes the foundation she thought was unshakable. A part of her always believed you needed her more, that she could pull back and you'd lean in, that she could hurt you, and you'd still try to fix what she broke. But now, the script has flipped. You didn't argue. You didn't explain. You didn't retaliate. You just walked away, not with bitterness, but with peace. And peace is the most unnerving response for someone who expected chaos. Now, when she remembers you, she doesn't see desperation. She doesn't remember pleas or breakdowns. She remembers discipline, the way you held your ground, the way you chose not to return, not as punishment, but as a boundary. That image haunts her, not because of what you did, but because of what she did, because of what she lost, when she assumed you'd always stay. And that's how regret begins. It doesn't knock, it seeps in, it arrives quietly, then all at once, and it builds. Because silence doesn't just hold space, it reveals truth. And the truth is this: you had more depth than she saw, more strength than she expected, and more worth than she ever treated you with. Now, no matter how many times she replays the story, she can't rewrite it, because the facts aren't what matter now. It's the feeling, and the more she remembers that feeling, the more she realizes she was wrong. 4. The return to self. She thought she could walk away, and you'd still be there. That no matter how far she pushed, you'd come hastening. She didn't believe you had the strength to let go, not because she was cruel, but because the world taught her that men like you never leave. You were the stable one, the one who stayed when it hurt, the one who forgave more than you should have, and that made you predictable, until one day you weren't. Because when steadiness suddenly becomes silent, it breaks everything she thought she understood. She expected you to react, to plead, to prove your worth, but you didn't. And that silence, it shook the ground beneath her confidence. Because when a strong man becomes unpredictable, the illusion of control begins to fall apart. She thought she held the upper hand. She thought your peace meant weakness. But real power doesn't come from chasing, it comes from restraint. You didn't fight to stay. You didn't argue to be heard. You simply chose yourself. And in that moment, you reclaimed something deeper than victory. You reclaimed your dignity. She never saw it coming. She thought the loudest response would hurt. But it was the quiet that broke her. No drama, no guilt trips, no final speech, just distance. And that distance was the truth she never wanted to face. Because when someone mattered, truly mattered, you don't remember the games. You remember the damage you caused. And now, that damage is louder than her pride. She checks her phone, out of habit, refreshes, waits, nothing, no message, no signal, just a blank screen that becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, she sees what she tried to ignore. She tries to fill the silence with noise. New people, temporary affection, empty compliments. But none of it lands, none of it sticks. Because deep down, she knows it's not real. And what you gave was nothing. She turns to feels real. She tries to distract herself. New people, surface-level affection, fleeting compliments, but none of it lasts. Because deep down, she knows what she lost. Not a man who tried to impress her, but one who made her feel seen without asking for anything in return. She remembers the way you looked at her, not with lust, not with judgment, but with genuine care, the kind of presence that said, I see you, I choose you, and that feeling is rare. Now, the silence she once called weakness has become something else entirely. A storm, not loud, but heavy. It surrounds her, not in sound, but in pressure, the weight of what she lost, the weight of who you were, and the man you still are without her. And here's the cruel irony. She may never admit it. Not to you, not to herself. Because saying it out loud would mean lowering the shield she spent years building. It would mean admitting that she misses you, that she regrets, that she wishes she had done things differently. But just because she won't say it doesn't mean she's not feeling it. The feeling is there, breaking through. Slowly, quietly, she wears the mask of pride, smiles, laughs, acts as if nothing happened. But when she's alone with her thoughts, that mask begins to crack, piece by piece, because few things hurt more than realizing you lost someone who truly loved you, and they didn't come running back. You didn't argue, you didn't beg, you didn't shout your worth. You simply left, with dignity still intact, and that exit, that quiet, steady exit, left the loudest echo. It's not punishment, it's not revenge, it's just reality setting in. She tries to replace what she had with you, but no one else understands her the way you did. No one listens like you. No one holds space like you. They praise her, desire her, smile at her, but they don't see her, not like you did. For a long time, you were the one who stayed. You gave her chances she didn't earn. You forgave more than she realized. You tried to be the better man, again and again, until one day you saw the truth. You saw that your loyalty had been mistaken for weakness, your kindness for submission. So you stepped back, not to punish her, but to protect yourself. Now that you're gone, the silence isn't just silence. It's presence. It echoes in her routine, in unfinished conversations, in places where your voice used to live. That morning text, that late-night comfort, the invisible anchor you once were, all gone. And what remains? A hollow rhythm, familiar, but lifeless. Everything still looks the same. but nothing feels right. She starts noticing it in the smallest ways. A song that once made her smile, the scent of you that still lingers in a memory, a joke that no longer feels funny when it's not told by you. Then it hits her. Your attention wasn't just something she received, it was something that made her feel real, seen, heard, held. Now she chases that feeling, not from you, but from others. Validation, praise, fleeting touches. None of it lands, because none of them know her like you did. None of them care like you did. They desire her, flatter her, but they don't see her. And that absence, it grows heavier each day, because once someone has been genuinely loved, they can never forget how that felt. And once they've been seen fully, they can't return to being merely tolerated. And now, she knows there's something quietly terrifying about when the person you thought would always be there just disappears, not in anger, not with drama, but slowly, deliberately, with a kind of calm that speaks louder than rage. You stopped explaining, stopped participating in the chaos, and that absence, it created a vacuum she never prepared for. As silencesovast, it began to echo louder than any fight ever could. And in that void, she started to feel something she never thought she'd associate with losing you. Emptiness, not the kind she could fix with noise, or friends, or distractions, but the kind that lingers, because it wasn't just your presence she craved. It was your attention. The way you listened without judgment, the way you looked at her, like she wasn't a burden to carry, but a person to understand. Even when she pushed you away, even when she made it difficult, you stayed present, steady, unmoved by her storms. And she grew dependent on that, quietly, without ever admitting it. She told herself, you'd always be there, that no matter how she acted, you'd forgive, that even if she neglected your love, you'd return open arms, no questions. And for a while, maybe she was right. Maybe you gave her more chances than she ever deserved. You tried to be the bigger person, again and again, so much that you forgot what it felt like to be valued in return. But something changed, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally saw the truth. You realized your consistency had been mistaken for surrender, that your kindness had been interpreted as weakness. And that was the moment you chose to step back, not to punish, not to teach a lesson, but to protect the last thing she never learned to honor, your self-respect. 5. The power of absence. You didn't just love her. You gave her a reference point, a standard, one that most men don't even come close to, not because of what you gave, but because of how you gave it. You didn't flood her with attention to win her over. You gave presence, depth, a calm that made her feel safe. And now, every man who comes after you will fall short in ways they won't understand. But she will. She'll keep chasing moments that feel like you, but they'll slip through her fingers, because it wasn't just the attention, it was the source. It was the way you saw her, without needing her to perform. The way you stayed, even after seeing the worst parts of her. You weren't a partner. You were a sanctuary, and she let that go, thinking she could find more, thinking you'd always be there, waiting in the wings. But there comes a moment, one quiet and unannounced, where even the most loyal man realizes he cannot stay where he is no longer respected. Now, she sits in the silence she created, and it's not just quiet, it's deafening, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. No more comfort, no more reassurance, only absence. And in that absence, echoes every apology she never gave, every appreciation she withheld, every act of taking you for granted. But time doesn't run in reverse. And regret doesn't come with a reset button. This is the price of ignoring presence. This is what happens when you lose someone who made you feel safe. Now, your silence speaks for you, and it's louder than any confession, any confrontation, any final goodbye. It doesn't beg, it doesn't blame, it simply leaves her with a truth she can no longer deny. You were the one, the real one, and now you're gone. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started loving yourself more. Maybe you did care too much. Maybe you forgave her more times than she even knew. And maybe, in holding it all together, you started to lose parts of yourself, not overnight, but piece by piece, until your peace, your dignity, your self-worth were being traded just to keep things from falling apart. But there's a limit, and once you reach it, care becomes exhaustion, loyalty becomes self-abandonment, and silence, it stops being weakness. It becomes survival. She won't understand that at first. She'll think you're playing hard to get, that you're waiting for her move. But you're not waiting anymore. You're done playing. And the moment she realizes this, something shifts. The ground beneath her pride begins to crack, because she never thought you'd actually stop showing up. She never believed the man who once gave endlessly would finally say, "This costs too much." Now, she sits with that silence, not as punishment, not as payback, but as the natural result of losing someone who simply can't be ignored forever. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's undeniable. That silence, it begins to multiply. It fills the space between your absence and her thoughts. It forces her to remember not the big moments, but the ones she thought didn't matter. The way you always noticed when something was wrong. The way you listened, even when her words were sharp. The way you stayed present when she pushed you away. She remembers how she used to feel safe just by hearing your voice. How your steady calm became her shelter. And most painfully, she remembers how effortlessly you gave, how naturally you cared, and how carelessly she treated it, as if it would always be there. Now, it's gone, and the space it left behind, it isn't empty, it's echoing. One day, she'll understand, not because you explained, but because silence did what your voice no longer would. She'll come to see that what you gave wasn't ordinary. It wasn't just affection. It was something most people never offer, and even fewer know how to receive. You didn't just care. You created safety. You saw her without asking her to be perfect. You stayed, even when she made it hard too. And that kind of presence, rare, real. Now, in your absence, she hears everything you stopped saying, every word left unsaid, every reassurance you once gave without needing to be asked. And that's where it begins. Not the regret, but the weight, because this kind of loss doesn't come with screaming. It arrives quietly and settles deep. It's not the kind of pain someone else can hold for her. It's internal, personal. It visits her in stillness, when the music stops, when no one's texting, when the world is quiet, and your memory gets loud. She'll replay your voice, not the words, but the tone, the calm, the patience, the way you never made her feel small, even when she gave you every reason to walk. And then it clicks. You didn't leave because you hated her. You left because you loved yourself enough to stop settling. You weren't angry. You were done. And now she tries to replace what's missing, not just a man, but a feeling, a sense of security she once had, but never valued. She looks for it in flattery, new faces, empty touches, but nothing feels like you, because no one else offered presence without performance. No one else stayed without needing to be chased. You were real, and now you're gone. Not temporarily, permanently. She once thought your silence was passivity. Now she knows it was power. Let her sit with it. Let time speak louder than you ever could, because the lessons that matter most are never taught by words. They're taught by absence. And when she finally understands, it won't be because you reached out. It'll be because she finally heard what the silence had been saying all along. You loved her with presence, with patience, with loyalty that asked for nothing in return. And then you went silent, not out of weakness, but because you had the strength to stop. No explanations, no drama. She expected you to break, but you didn't. You stepped back with quiet dignity. And in that space, everything you once were, it started to echo louder than ever. This was never about revenge. This is the story of a man who chose to respect himself. And that's what she'll feel the longest. If you've ever gone quiet, not to disappear, but to rediscover who you are, drop a comment. One sentence is enough. For you, for the men out there who are walking that same silent path. And if you're on that journey now, subscribe to the Stoic spirit. You're not alone. You're not cold. You're not broken. You're simply becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to be understood, to be powerful,